Hi everybody. I'm an archaeologist in Greece, and I'm going to take you to a different kind of discipline, more in regard to the built heritage science, and in the framework of climate change and climate crisis. I would argue that the cultural heritage is rather an understudied field in climate policies. As you can see, for all these conventions, international conventions and frameworks, that before it has been omitted of the terminology cultural heritage, and slightly, like you can see like a more concrete explicit reference of cultural heritage in response to climate crisis, for example, from terms of socioeconomic factors and to individual assets, and then linked to cultural heritage and local tourism. And also, to give you a bit of like more specific case studies in Greece, for example, that we know that if you have ever visited Greece, that you know in recent years there's a lot of wildfires, earthquakes. Greece is actually one of the most seismically active countries in the world. And there's a lot of flood and sea level rise. And also, in terms of slow deterioration patterns, we see a lot of strong wind and salt crystallizations, for example, that can damage cultural monuments in long term. So these are some recent events, and you can see how climate change is also impacting on the tourists. And for example, this is the island of Delos, and you can see the sea level rise already impacting the inland archaeological site, and it's especially true for island sites. And the right one is the site of Delphi. It says very vulnerable to landslides and earthquakes. So some of the research that I'm doing, for example, one aspect is specifically on marble, and since I cannot really experiment with this physical marbles that is in the monument, so I was experimenting more in the lab. And the idea is that you can see after some testing that there are, with thermal testing, with freeze and thaw, that you can see there are many different complex climate-responsive phenomena shaped by this cumulative environmental exposure. And these are some of the techniques, that you can use different techniques to kind of stimulate the environmental factors. And I think it's especially true, for example, given the recent California wildfire, that has this impact of being a period of droughts and then followed by intense precipitation. And you can also stimulate that in the experiments, and you can see it's very relevant to our real-time environment. So, for example, this is another biochemical deterioration of monuments, of how high level of heavy like concentration of different minerals, metallic kind of pollutions, and how it can affect on the monument itself. So I'm just going to briefly talk about, the all this World Heritage Site that we have seen, and this is actually a kind of selective monuments that the Greek government have chosen to protect. And they have formed the part of the construction of these national identities in Greece. And these are all, classical monuments, most of them. So just briefly mention about this authoritarian framework in Greece and in respect to cultural heritage monuments. How Greek, for example, as an example, they have employed this reverse archaeology, that it also soon become imperative for Greeks not only to own an appointed heritage, but also to prove worthy of the privilege. So it's a kind of example of selective kind of choice of monuments display to the tourists and to the world as a whole, and to choose what to preserve and what not. And also in terms of heritage protection, so I've conducted some interviews, and you can see, like, when we talk about co-creation, that for Greek government in particular, it lacked of this co-creation with the communities themselves, and they're quite top-down management style. And these are just some of the heritage policy that's specifically in response to climate change. And I'm just going to give you as an example, and this is one of the GIS platforms they have created. And this is a site of ancient Olympia, where you can choose the RCP scenarios. And so they give you different environmental factors like droughts, floods, heat waves, forest fires, in return in terms of vulnerability, adaptability, and etc. But at the same time, it's quite ambivalent of how Greek governments respond to this new phenomenon of climate change. For example, the minister herself, she has stated in a press conference that immediate, widespread, and systematic risk from the effect of climate change is not recorded. And when I was interviewing, for example, the Directorate for Restoration of Ancient Monuments, he also admit that we can tell the monuments do not suffer from climate change. They suffer from earthquakes, the fires in the past, the ground drainage, if there's water in the ground. So in a sense that they still kind of manage all this damage in a rather conservative approach. And it's kind of dubious whether they actually accept this new terminology of climate change and, afterwards a list of series of actions, if it's indeed in response specifically to climate change, or if they recognize it only as traditional, risk factors. So, this is some of the overview of taking Greek government as an example. It's an important case study because, tourism is a heavy industry in Greece, and I think it can be used as a useful case studies when we talk about built heritage in the world. And we can see that there are a list of, institutional frameworks existing for Greece. It's already, acting, and it has been supported with a lot of international fundings. But the opportunities and the weakness is that there's this fragmented governance and coordination and conservative approach. But opportunities existing for public engagement and heritage as commons governance models. So I'm just going to present on the last part of experimental case as a proof of concept that we have also collaborated with another university in Greece. So when we talk about involving communities, how can we involve communities in built heritage? So I'm adopting a crowdsourcing approach, which means that we use the crowd of humans to solve problems defined by the system owners. In that case, the citizens are no longer passive receivers, but they are more dependent. They are co-creator of these public services in a sense that they do not really, they are not dependent anymore on the formal implementations of the government, from the traditional do not touch approach, this bureaucratic approach that you can really affect the monuments by the citizens in a positive sense. So for example, taking the case study of Hadrian's Arch that is in the center of Athens, and you can see that there's a lot of, besides the climate factors that is impacting on the aesthetic appearance of the monuments, you also see vandalism, human factors is impacting the monument itself. So the idea is that the citizens or visitors, anybody, they can have these intimate connections with the monuments by taking photos. And then you can identify cracks or different levels or different aspects of deterioration on the monument. And then in this app, for example, and you can kind of comment, be more actively engaged. And in the end, you can monitor these monuments from time to time of the change of deterioration patterns, and also as a way to inform these top authorities of these neglected monuments or monuments that's in distant regions, and in a way that citizens can help really to make a decision on the monuments. So we did this this experiments or like on-site survey with the tourists. And then we have developed this app, and you can also try it at home. So, for example, when we log in, and this is our job Hadrian, and then the tourists can upload photos, and then it's approved by the data manager. And so this is the state of development we're in currently. There are also other types of monuments that you can do. So the idea is that in the end, we can produce orthophotos, which are geometrically undistorted photos that can generate this image, like this visualization, but also it's possible to generate 3D constructions depending on the funding that we have, but it's also a challenge because we don't really have a lot of funding. So it's just a, like an experiment and also an idea of co-creation that we have been talking about in the climate heritage or climate field. And it's important that we recognize that climate change is not only about technical dimensions. It's not about technologies that we use to solve problems, but also about the social dimensions. Because, for example, in the case of heritage management, it's a highly politicized field because of the network of funding that we're receiving. So in the end, I just want to promote this just climate transition and also with the intersectionality of cultural heritage preservation. To have more solidarity and to have more fairness, to move away from this technocratic, exclusionary sectoral form of climate adaptation, and to focus more on human beings, but also to non-living entities. So in the end, I encourage you to stay connected. We also have these interdisciplinary centers that I've initiated in collaboration with other professors. And if you ever wish to organize conferences, similar ones, you can contact me. Yeah, thank you.